All right, you're gonna need your sketchbook and a pencil to start, and you're gonna want your ebony pencil as well for later. All right, first find something that is round that you can trace. And I just want to put 4 circles in my sketchbook and make sure they're like a good medium size, not too big, not too little. Okay, and let's label these. Smooth and blended, hatching, cross-hatching, and circular. All right, before I start shading in a sphere, I want to identify the imaginary light source. I don't have an object that I'm drawing from, I'm just drawing from imagination. So I need to imagine where the light source is coming from. And for this one, I'm just going to put my light source here. All right, where this little star is. And I want to imagine that there's a spotlight shining onto this circle, like this. All right, so if you could imagine, the light is going to be hitting it on these edges right here. Okay, wherever the light is closest to the object, that's going to be the lightest part. And then as we move backwards, we're going to have darker values and shadows, and that's going to give it the illusion of 3D. Now, this circle is just a flat shape right now. I want to turn it into a sphere, which is a 3-dimensional form. And in order to do that, I need to curve the lines of my pencil, okay? Almost like my pencil is touching the surface of a sphere. All right, so if you could imagine like you're feeling something that's rounded, like this can, okay? If you're touching the outside, then your finger is kind of going in a circular motion, right? It's going up and down. We want to be kind of doing the same thing with our pencil. For this, I like to start dark and then go to light. And I'm going to start in the shadow, which is the furthest part away from the light source. I would turn your paper and turn your wrist often. And I'm trying to use pencil marks that are going to be smooth and blended. Okay, you don't want it to look streaky or have a lot of pencil lines. Now I'm going to start to use that oval technique, and you still see how my pencil is curving to the outline of the form. Okay, that's going to make it look 3D. See, the shadow is already looking pretty good. I'm going to go back over and make the shadow darker over here. And by turning my paper and turning my wrist, I'm going to avoid any straight lines. If you start shading using straight lines, then it's not going to look 3D. It's just going to look like a flat circle with a gradient in it. All right, I'm lightening up on my pencil. I'm getting closer to the light source now. All right, I think this is a good start. What I'm gonna do is darken the shadow, and then I need more midtones. It's kind of a little bit too light right here. I like how this edge is looking, and I'm actually going to erase any straight lines that I have. Okay, I'm gonna go back and darken my shadows and my midtones. There, that looks pretty good. Now the next step is I'm going to take something soft like a paper towel or a tissue, and I'm going to blend it. Remember to start in the lighter part and then push the values into the darker shadows. All right, it got a little smudged on the edges, so I'm going to take an eraser and clean up the edges. All right, and there's the smooth blended sphere. Now let's move on to hatching. So I'm going to turn my paper so it's a little bit more comfortable for my wrist. And remember, hatching is a series of lines. You don't really want them to look like stripes or a pattern. You want them to look like a texture. I'm overlapping the lines a little bit. Okay, so it looks slightly more blended, but I can still see the texture of all the lines. I'm gonna clean up the edges here too. And I'm still using the values in a crescent shape, even though I'm using straight lines going across. All right, now for the lighter values, my lines are getting farther apart and I'm not pressing down as hard on my pencil. Now I'm going to make my shadows darker and clean up the edges. All right, moving on to cross hatching. I'm going to be doing the same sort of thing as the hatching sphere. Let's use the same light source. Okay, so let's just start with more hatching. All right, now I've got a crossover, but I'm not just gonna go straight across because that's going to make the circle look flat. Instead, I'm going to be using cross-hatching lines that are following the contour of the circle. You see how they're kind of diagonal? Okay, the lines are kind of going diagonally across. All right, last one is circular. And remember, this one is the controlled scribbling. The smaller and tighter your circles are and the more you overlap and the harder you press down, the darker the values are gonna be. And then you gradually lighten up on your hand and you have more space inside your circles, and then you will get lighter values that way. All right, there you have it. 4 spheres and 4 different textures. All right, here are some common mistakes that I want y'all to consider. Okay, before you turn this in, I need you to check to make sure that you didn't do any of these no-nos. All right, so the first one, okay, this does not appear 3D because the artist used, or because I used straight lines to fill in the values. Even though there's a nice gradient, okay, there's no curve in the pencil to make it look 3D. All right, this one, it does not look 3D because the gradient is not correct, right? So it just went from dark to medium to nothing at all. That's only 3 values, and that's not going to work if you want it to look 3D. All right, and then finally, first of all, it's really sloppy. There's not a lot of craftsmanship here, but I started by using a curved shape, but then my lines got flat as I moved on. Another mistake is that we leave a distinct shape for the highlight. Okay, this doesn't really look like a highlight to me. It just looks like a gap, right? It just looks like a different shape that you created and separating it with values. So make sure you're not doing that either. We don't want any of ours to look like this. Okay, another good way to check for understanding is to go back and look at your value scales. All right, so if your value scales are correct and you have a full range of 8 different values, okay, your circles should look the same. So does your circle have all 8 values just like your value scale? Okay, does your hatching, cross-hatching circular value scales match your circles? Okay, if so, then you're good.